Hello. Average Bush here today to talk to you about a book that I have read recently in the challenge, and I hope to inform you on, called Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. Jocko Willink and Leif Babin are two legendary commanders from the War for Vermati, Iraq, and Jocko Willink was a level higher than Leif Babin, but Leif Babin directly reported to Jocko Willink in case that clears anything up. They took their experience in war in the Navy SEALs and have applied that to the business world and have also released a couple books, and the most impactful and popular of their books is Extreme Ownership. The book is separated into three parts with chapters being subsections of each single part of that. The first one being mindset, second one being strategy, and third one being sustaining success. The point of this book is to incorporate extreme ownership into your own life, your own personal battlefields, whether that be the business world, family matters, actual war, whatever it comes to be, and be the best leader you can possibly be and dominate your battlefield. So the book opens up with a pretty harrowing recount from Jocko Willink of a time that they accidentally had friendly fire and it was fracture side, blue on blue. And the importance of this is to express his first account of extreme ownership, and it sets the mood for the entire book. He was worried out of his mind, sweating bullets what the higher ups would do to him. Would he lose his position as a commander, or what worse could happen to him? Because fracture side friendly fire is considered a unforgivable crime almost for the Navy SEALs. It is something that they vow to never ever do. It's very hard to do that in urban warfare, but it is something that they absolutely refuse to do. And Jocko Willink is extremely worried about what will happen to him due to his failure as a commander. In the board meeting, he asks the whole group of people that had come to see his presentation. He starts off with who is to blame for the fracture side blue on blue. One man that works under him says it's his fault, that he didn't correctly communicate the location of the allies. He says wrong, Jocko Willink says. This happens two more times, other people fessing up that it is their fault. And while that is courageous of those men, Jocko every single time says, no, it is not your fault. And he eventually says, it's my fault. I am the Supreme Commander. I cannot let a single thing in the mission go past me. I am in command and I take charge of everything. I have to let everybody and every single section of my command know and deeply understand the consequences and the circumstances of what is to happen. I am the only person to blame, and I am completely responsible. Even for someone as prestigious as him, this was an extremely, extremely hard task. He describes how shaky he was, and he was so scared of having his commander role in the army, just his role in the army being completely revoked. But this first stage setter for the rest of the book is an example of extreme responsibility and how it in turn actually gained him a lot of respect from his higher ups and the people that worked under him. Very, very inspiring story. Another section is Believe in the Why, and this one kind of spans throughout the rest of the book in terms of its implications, but the idea behind it is that there is sort of this disconnect between people that are in lead and the people that are on the front lines doing their work. So the idea is that you have to deeply within yourself understand why you are trying to accomplish a mission or a particular subpart of the mission, and you need to make sure that you perfectly communicate that to the people that are on the front lines doing your work. This in the business world can just be people that work for you and you are the manager, or this is also applicable to you as somebody that is on the front lines and understanding what a leader above you makes their decisions with. because there's this thing that also reoccurs in the book is the idea of being disconnected from the frontline workers, and that is something that you need to try and avoid for one, of course, but one of the primary things you need to do is to fully communicate with them until you are certain that everybody understands why you are doing something in a mission. The example it gives is that they have to work with the Iraqi soldiers, and this was a massive undertaking on their part because they knew that the Iraqi soldiers were so inferior to their own capabilities that they doubted that they could even get them to understand anything in terms of being able to protect themselves. But the why that he communicates to his troops is that they have to do this, and the reason that they're going to is because if they are overtaken, the Iraqi soldiers, from insurgents again, once they leave and they've won the war, who's going to come back and fight the insurgents again? It's going to be America. So they need to teach them as much as they possibly can through communication and hands-on experience on how to at least do a good enough job to protect themselves in the future. And him explaining that to every person that was angry and upset by his decision to do this, he didn't want to do it either. It was told him to do this by one of the higher ups above Jocko. But the importance of this was so that he was able to communicate it to every single person below him and get the point across. And this general idea applies everywhere when you are in charge of something. Say you are a father and your kids don't want to clean up or something, you need to thoroughly communicate to them why they're doing it. What are the consequences if they don't in terms of a dirty house? Stuff like that. It applies anywhere and everywhere. The severity of it is just amplified because of the wartime effect of this book. And another section within part one is ego. A lot of leaders, especially ones that see success, at least early on in their career, have an ego problem. And the idea behind this is that you should not be prideful. That leads to cockiness. You need to be humble and always willing to learn from people around you, whether lower or higher. You can't let your own ego get in the way of your personal learning and the success of your team. Your ego is the least important part of any given situation where you are leading others. You need to be humble and be ready to just get the job done and do it successfully. So part two goes into different strategy portions. One of the first parts is working with different teams, and the idea behind this one is to give you the idea of how important it is for the leader of a team. The leader is the most integral part to success or failure in a group effort. It gives an example of lack of better wording. They in the SEALs when they were doing SEAL training, there's this thing called Hell Week, and it is this insanely rigorous physical challenge that is just unbelievable for someone like me who's never done something remotely this hard. And for a whole week they're doing this. And they have subsections of groups led by other SEAL up-and-comers that are the leaders of their individual teams. So for a specific run that they were doing, it was sort of a race, a competition to see who could get first, and every position after that. There were six groups, and the ones that were always the front runners, always got first by such a long shot, was Team 2. They had unbridled success at every single race. And another thing I should mention is that the winning team is able to take breaks, whereas the teams that lose, they're punished for losing and they have to do more rigorous testing and project work. And the team that consistently came in last was Team 6. And the deficit between, say, 5th place and 6th place with Team 6 was massive. So they wanted to do a little test, the people overwatching and teaching them in this week of hard training. And what they were going to do was they were going to take the leader from Team 2 and Team 6 and swap them. Team Leader 2 was definitely not happy about this. He had grown personal bonds with the people around him, and he definitely didn't want to work with the team that was the people in last place. But he was a fantastic leader and understood that he was the most important part, and he needed to bring out the success through making an example of himself to Team 6. The leader of Team 6 blamed his team for not being up to snuff, and he was just so happy that he was getting the best team to work with. When they finally did the test, would you know it, Team 6 with Team 2's leader came in first place, and the second place was Team 2. And the idea behind this is that he was able to take all of the weight onto himself and push his team to greatness. It's honestly insane. I want to shake the man's hand for doing this. But to wrap this one up, it shows how you as a leader can condition yourself mentally to take on any challenge where you have a team that you have to work with and you are able to push them to success. It's just a matter of your own commitment and your own resolve. Another portion of the story that I have actually, this was probably the most impactful part of the book for me as of the current moment, was simplicity in a strategy. And the example is with a junior officer that has never seen wartime, and I'm going to shorten this story quite considerably, where he made this very, very complicated plan to get his troops from point A to point B. And it was, he worked hard on this plan. It was well thought out, but especially with how risky it is being in Vermati, they advised him, Leif Babin, advised him to simplify the plan because it was too complicated, and when things go sour, which they inevitably will, the more complicated a plan is, the harder it is to recover from whatever the sour spots are. And would you know it, once they convinced him to simplify the plan, things did go south. They were hit with insurgents that were just so vicious with their attack on them. And if they had had a harder plan to go by, they may have not survived. But they were able to fight off the insurgents and were able to come out with a victory. And it was clear by the end of it that he was shaken by, if they hadn't told him to simplify it, how poorly it could have gone. This portion is particularly impactful to me because I have thought quite a lot in the past couple months about how I always complicate things, and maybe, just maybe, the best way to approach myself and approach things outside of me, the most effective way is the most simple way. And so far, I have to say that for the majority of the time, that's true. Simplicity is extremely important. In a leadership role in the business world, for example, it's super important that your plan is simple so that you are able to communicate it to the people below you the easiest as well, and also being able to carry it out because things are not always going to go to plan, and the simpler it is, the more easily the engine of your plan is able to keep running. And the final part of the strategy portion is the idea of decentralized command. And you see this a lot if you think about it. When you have a big company, you will have, say, let's say Walmart. You will have the manager of a given Walmart. You'll have a regional manager who looks over a certain amount of stores, and then you'll have a manager above that that looks over the regions, and then you'll have the person on top, just for an example. But the importance of this sort of command is that as the leader at the top, or you have leaders below you, you have them for a reason, because you don't have enough time and energy to be able to give every single aspect of an operation your full attention. You have to be able to look at the big picture in your perspective as your part of the leader and be able to do that effectively. When your consideration is having to be put into everybody that is at the most minor part of a plan, you will find that you'll become way less impactful. You'll be able to get way less done. So you'll need people that are leaders of smaller teams and be able to do decentralized command. And you need to, going back to the in the why part, you need to be able to fully and as simply as possible explain to them what you are doing and why. And this, yet again, applies to both the business world, it especially applies to combat. But simply being able to explain to, like, say, your oldest son or something why you're having them do a specific something while they're babysitting, for example. It applies anywhere, really. And part three is sustaining success. It starts off with a section or a chapter called Leading Your Boss. This was something that was definitely impactful for me because I'm not the leader of where I work. And the idea behind it is that if you have desires, you have worries in your given job or in something that they are instructing you to do, you need to, in a hands-on matter, explain to them and show them what your issues and what your worries are. There was an example of a manager that was disconnected from his crew members, and the Jocko Willink was talking to one of the managers below the boss, and he was frustrated and communicating that to Jocko Willink with how frustrating his plan was because they had problems at their store that they just could not achieve because they couldn't achieve the plan because they had these particular worries. And he advised him to invite the boss to their store and verbally, in person, communicate to them what is preventing him and what is worries that they have to consider. And this is a very good way, the best way, to be able to communicate to your leader why something is the way it is. Because when you are, say, decentralized command, you have leaders below you, they are going to see more of their particular role than you're going to see of it. Unfortunately, it's almost natural for somebody that is in a higher level of command to become disconnected with the lower ones because they have to focus on their own work. So as somebody that is working for someone else, you have to make your worries and your ambitions with your job clear and be able to communicate that to the people above you. One of the most stressful part of the books came in the second to last section called Imperfect Decisions, and it details a encounter where Leif Babin was in a watchtower with the sniper that was the writer for American Sniper. Of course, I forget his name right as I'm telling you this, but they saw movement in a adjoining building. There was a curtain, and they saw somebody that had a scoped weapon slightly peek out from inside of it. And this was very dangerous because this sniper could unleash havoc on the closest friendlies. So they contacted the commander of the platoon that was closest to them and explained what the situation was. But they didn't want to take the shot because they didn't know if this was a friendly or not. So in a very, very intense, adrenaline rushing section, the commander of the given section, is getting angrier and angrier with Leif Babin because they won't take the shot because they are unsure if they will be able to if they're going to actually kill someone that's a threat. It was, oh god, it gives me trembles just thinking about it. But by the end of it, they deduced that that was in fact a sniper on their side. They were looking at the incorrect building. So not only does that give you an idea of taking the least risky of imperfect decisions, as the chapter is explaining, but in wartime specifically, urban warfare, it is so much easier than it seems, and it already seems pretty easy, to confuse certain buildings with others and make very minute very small mistakes, how that can turn into friendly fire. And the very last section of the book is a whole bunch of sort of seesaw comparisons of balance that a leader must have. You must be forward going, but you cannot be overly aggressive. You cannot be cocky, but you should be humble. And there's such a long list of these, but I I don't know. It's just sort of recapping in very small, like I said, seesaw sort of balance comparisons to the whole book. So essentially, by the end of this, what is there to take away from it? If you are somebody that is a leader, a manager, a boss, or you seek to be, this is an immensely important book to you. And it's also important to you if you work under somebody, because understanding what they have to have go on in their mind and in their processes, this book will give you context as to how you can be a better worker for them, how you can lead them and they can lead you. Because the point of this book is to not attain great leadership and that be the great goal. The point of this book is to be as successful and as efficient at completing a goal, not pride, not status, the mission. So, with all that out of the way, I don't think that this book for me personally was as immediately impactful as the last two, but I think once I begin going farther into the business world, that this book will be one that I come back to a couple times, multiple times, because not only is it fun to listen to, because if you haven't listened to the audiobook version, I definitely recommend it. Leaf and Jocko, just man, they do such a great job with their audiobook. But anyway, once I begin going farther into the work industry, I think that this book will have more and more effect on me as I go out. I definitely recommend it if you're somebody that has already reached those heights or you just really want to understand aspects of the business world that you didn't already know about. I would give this book a yes out of 10. It's good. Read it. Alrighty, and that'll do it for this one. I will see you guys next time. I will have the next review maybe done soon. Ka-chow.